This is Right to Life Radio with John Girardi on Power Talk 96.7 and AM 1400, a production of the Right to Life of Central California. And now, here's your host, John Girardi.
It's a huge week with a leaked draft majority opinion from Justice Alito apparently overturning Roe v. Wade, breaking as enormous bombshell news on Monday night earlier this week. I've got the whole opinion here in my non-nicotine stained fingers. That's what Rush Limbaugh always used to do. He would rustle paper right near the microphone like this.
You're trying to say you're hoping to be Rush Limbaugh?
I'll never. No one's ever going to be Rush Limbaugh. We're all just doing bad.
Don't say never.
We're all just doing bad Rush Limbaugh imitations. Anyway, we will dig into Justice Alito's draft opinion and what it means and all of that. For now, we are going to talk about what's happening in the here and now right here in Fresno with our Stories from the Sidewalk segment with Linda Talia. Welcome, Linda, again to our every first Saturday of the month. We talk about the stuff we're doing at Right to Life of Central California, right outside Planned Parenthood, where Linda is sort of leads our ministry of directly interacting with women and couples going in and out of Planned Parenthood. So, Linda, what stories do we have this week? It's not always sunshine and rainbows out there in front of Planned Parenthood, obviously, but you've had a couple of different interactions that you wanted to share about some of the negative emotions that sometimes you encounter there and what that can reveal about folks that you're interacting with.
Well, one of the things that can be intimidating for a lot of the volunteers, especially, is a car full of teenagers.
Mm-hmm. I'm still intimidated by teenagers. Even when I can speak for an audience of 10,000 adults and with totally fine. But you put me in front of 30 teenagers, and I revert back to being 16 years old myself. So yeah, anyway.
I guess it doesn't bother me because I've raised 4 girls, and so
you've been through that. Has been
said, continue to be said. I can't even go somewhere without one of them saying, "Are you gonna wear that?" In fact, I remember I was going to one of my high school reunions, and I came out and I was thinking I looked pretty cool.
Yeah.
And 2 of my daughters were sitting there, and they're like,
really?
Are you going to tuck that in or something? And I was like, what am I supposed to do? I can't go shopping.
My wife is starting to experience this already with like with a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old girl. Yeah.
It never goes away.
I'm guessing it's not going to improve. So anyway.
So it doesn't really bother me. I see a group of teenage girls and I think, oh, here we go.
Yeah.
I'm ready. So I had a group pulling in, and of course they were heckling me. They like to do that. And I find that if I just sort of step back and wait a minute and just stay consistent with, can I offer you a free flower? I also have free information, and I just don't escalate with them.
Yeah. One
One of them will usually sort of simmer down and come over and see what I have to say.
Right.
And I find that if it's not that person who is having some sort of crisis, it's their good friend, and they're really trying to do good works.
Yeah.
And so what I wanted to lead in with that is that when we go out there on the sidewalk or just even in the general public, we tend to just sort of, what's the word? Just, react.
Yeah.
React to people's actions instead of
proactively anticipating.
Instead of responding.
Yeah, instead of responding.
Yeah. So I try to remember that, and it sometimes it's hard because you're kind of like, oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's talk about this. But so I've seen a plethora of negative emotions or just harder emotions, and I find that they are usually covering up for something bigger. Usually, it's fear.
Sure.
I mean, there's a lot of fear out there. Because especially when you have younger people, and actually that's not even true. I've had a lot of 30-something-year-olds going in and they have the issue, and one of the first things they come up with is, I don't know how I'm going to tell my mom.
Yeah.
Like I can't figure this out, and I got to tell my
Well,
mother.
yeah. I mean, we always talk about that idea of, or at least I always talk about the idea of security factors. Like the more security factors an individual pregnant woman has, the more likely she is to not choose abortion. So someone like my wife, who has a employed, loving, committed husband and family and everything, has way more security factors than your
Uh-huh.
average person going into Planned Parenthood. And with security comes a lack of fear. And without those security factors in your life of supportive partner, financial security, et cetera, et cetera. I mean,
Plus, I
a
think
lot
no
of the
matter
abortion,
what-
a lot of the abortion decision is driven by
Yeah.
fear, and
Yes.
not always irrational fear, but it is fear.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, fear of not just being scared, but fear of being judged or fear of letting someone down. And, in light of the fact that Mother's Day is coming up, think about it. I mean, it doesn't really matter who you are. You don't want to disappoint your mom.
Of course.
So,
yeah.
so there is a
Well,
big.
and you've had whole. I recall different, persons you've encountered where a lot of it was premised on some family member, and that family member's outsized opinion on the question,
Where,
and
yeah.
being like determined. I think I remember you had one
It was
person you
a
interacted with. It was a
sister.
sister, yeah. And
that
the
wanted
sister,
to kill me or
and
something.
the sister hated your guts,
Yes.
but it was, and
Yeah.
so yeah, I can
Yeah.
understand why that would be
Right.
such a big thing.
So we have the teenage car. So we just wanted to put that out there that happens, and you just sort of have to just be consistently thinking of what could be driving that kind of reaction. The other thing that we tend to get a lot of every day, it's weird. We have a lot of males driving by and, flipping us off or screaming at us. And the thing I think is, what is going on here? But if you think about it, all this talk about choice, a man has no choice. They have
Sure.
the choice before the person gets pregnant.
Well, sure, yeah,
But after, what are you going to do?
It's
Put him in the closet?
yeah,
I
it's
mean, you
completely
have
out of
no
your
choice.
hands. Yeah,
So I feel like a lot of the men that are going by and they're making these negative remarks and stuff probably have had an experience with an abortion. Either somebody that was they were in a relationship with, an intimate relationship with. Maybe it was their sister. Sometimes even their mother. And they just it's their way of either justifying it in their mind, this angry justification, or
Sure.
they feel guilty and they just feel like they need to just say something.
yeah. Well, and it's you're right about the powerlessness thing, and that there's some range, and I think it can range from I'm completely powerless in this situation. I have no say, so I'm just going to put on a brave face and make fun, all the way to. I mean, there is a genuine chauvinism and
I'll show you.
well, there's a genuine chauvinism and self, CYA aspect for men with abortion that, I've seen this in online stuff with among young men about, oh yeah, I'll pay for your abortion, like as a sort of
Oh, say more
chauvinistically
about
utilize
that.
it, chauvinistically like talking about how, oh yeah, well I'll pay for your I'll pay for your plan B, I'll pay for your because that's what abortion is ultimately, and in a lot of cases it's a way for men to not have to take responsibility for something that they did,
True.
for
Okay, I see where you're going with
for
that.
the product of what they did,
Yeah.
and that it can be used in a very chauvinistic CYA sort of fashion for men. So I think you can have a range of reactions from men in that context, whether it's I'm going to be engaging in braggadocio because I'm
I'm a man.
because
I'll tell you what to do.
Screw those kids. I don't want no kids.
I've
Screw
heard
that.
that too.
Yeah, the phrase "f them
Yeah.
kids."
It's
And then
weird.
which a lot of pro-choicers. So the phrase it involves the F word. So "f them kids." I think originally it was a phrase that Michael.
It's okay. You didn't say it all the
I
way,
didn't
so you don't
say
have
it,
to go to
so
confession.
Yeah,
You're
but,
good.
Yeah, well, I don't. It's not so much confession I'm worried about as much as the FCC. So Michael Jordan, I think, said it about like a kids' camp or something where the kids were wanting something, and he said, "F them kids." And now it's entered into like the youth lexicon, and people say it in regards to the abortion question. And so I think there's a range of braggadocio sort of reactions from young men that I think can come from a place of powerlessness.
Yes.
Often.
I think that happens a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, I just see, I look in them. It's every walk. It's a nice car or it's a dumpy car. It doesn't matter. Today, even, I had someone, like they were behind someone who was turning, and this guy just laid on his horn and he's putting the thumbs down sign. And there's like 5 of us out there, and he's just like, blah, 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 negative. But at least I live in a country where you can express what you want. And I was like, does that even go
weird.
together?
That's weird. Yeah. Well,
I guess-
glad he cares about.
Wow. Thanks.
Glad he cares about the First Amendment anyway.
I know, he's like,
Maybe he would have
"What?"
helped us out with our lawsuit that we had. Anyway.
Don't know.
So anyway, let's end on a happy note and talk about we have a baby shower coming up for one of the young ladies that you've interacted with on the sidewalk. So maybe share a little bit about that story.
Okay, so we've been interacting and following with and talking and supporting Aleda, who is due at the end of the month, at
Great.
the end of this month. I can't believe it's already here. And so we are throwing her a baby shower on the 10th.
Great.
And people can actually go on to Amazon, and if they feel like they want to contribute to the baby shower, there is a link for them to do so.
Right. It should be right on our homepage, rtlcc.org.
Yeah.
And
or you
so
could come
should be
call
able to
the
see it.
office and then
Yeah.
we can tell you how to do it. But
559-229-2229.
yeah,
So
and she is just the most gracious person ever. She just constantly is texting me, thank you so much.
Mhm.
I don't know where I'd be without this. And I just
Yeah.
think this is really what it's all about. And
Right. And it's
we're there.
yeah, it's really encouraging to see, no matter how many, one finger salutes you get, no matter how, no matter
Age
how much,
signs, whatever, IQ sign. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. No matter all of that stuff, that the message does get through to people, and
works.
what a lot of these people just need is just
Support.
have an interaction and have
Yeah.
support and provide them with
Yeah.
because and it is a thing where, I think I remember it must have been early when you started, this woman who just about what motivates people to react negatively.
Yeah.
A woman who, it's one-way street, so you have to kind of circle around the block if you want to come back. She came around the block, screamed at you, threw stuff at you,
Yeah.
went around the block, came back to apologize and said, I had an abortion and blah, 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 blah. And I do wonder how much of people's negative
A lot.
yeah, there's some statistic that before the
Mhm.
age of 45, 1 in 4 women in America will have had an abortion by that point.
I think everybody
Which,
has a friend who has,
yeah,
or a sister, or
somebody, yeah.
and it's just we just need to turn this corner so people know we
Yeah.
support people all the way through to we're doing a baby shower for someone we don't even know.
Well, our thanks to Justice Alito for maybe
Yeah,
giving
starting-
us all the equipment so that we can start legally restricting
back up
this.
again.
Exactly. So anyway,
Start
just
on
to
the
close
right side.
just to close out, Linda, you can share about the Move for Life Club. So this is our pro-life running exercise
walking
club /
club, yeah.
walking club.
Exercise
You
too.
guys are having your first race this Saturday not your first race, but
Yeah.
participating in the Mother's Day race at Woodward Park today.
Mhm.
And people can find out more about Move for Life if they go to rtlcc.org.
Yep.
And so, yeah.
Anybody can join. And the main thing is we just want people out there wearing a T-shirt that says Move for Life. So people come and ask questions and say, what is this about? And we can share that
There you go.
we're about life.
There you go. All right. Thank you, Linda. All right.
No problem. Love it.
We will be back right after this with Jonathan Keller from California Family Council. We will do a deep dive into Justice Alito's draft opinion and what it means next on Right to Life Radio. Dolly Parton on Right to Life Radio. Keep it going, Dolly.
Wow.
Dolly Parton with us here on Right to Life Radio. Good morning.
Man, if that doesn't get you moving.
It's a Mule Skinner's daughter here on Right to Life Radio, the best music in the greater Fresno area radio market. All right, Jonathan. I'm holding in my never nicotine-stained fingers.
Never, ever? Not even in college or
I think I had like one cigar.
one cigar? Yeah.
All right. Anyway, my only one-time nicotine-stained fingers. The printout of the draft opinion written by Justice Alito that would be the opinion overturning Roe v. Wade. This is the opinion that was leaked to Politico. As I said in the last segment, I believe I am the only commentator in the greater Fresno area radio market or television market or any kind of media market who has actually read this thing in toto, and I'm going to walk you through it. So the main structure, Jonathan, as I explain this to you as the proxy for the audience, and feel free, Jonathan, to ask questions as the proxy for the audience.
I will stand in as Joe Q. pro-lifer.
So the main structure of this is Justice Alito kind of summarizing, clearing his throat, saying what he's going to do. Then it's sort of two parts. One is his analysis of, is abortion a right that is protected under the Constitution? Newsflash, the answer to that is no. And then the second part is looking at stare decisis, our old friend. Now, stare decisis is a Latin phrase. It means that you should always be able to kill babies. No, that's not what it means. Okay. Stare decisis is a Latin phrase. It means to stand with decided matters, to stand with decided questions. And it is a prudential principle that justices on the Supreme Court use in deciding whether or not to overturn a prior precedent of the court that they don't think is quite right. The thing is, it's not really a rule. It's more like guidelines, as they said in Pirates of the Caribbean about the Pirate Code. The Supreme Court justices can kind of do whatever they want. If they want to overturn a prior decision, they can. If they don't want to, they don't have to, and they don't have to necessarily. There's no from on high standard for when they are and are not allowed to do so.
But John, I'm Susan Collins, and I was informed that stare decisis is.
Sorry, Susan. Should have been a little smarter about your civics. Anyway, so Susan Collins, the Republican pro-choice senator from Maine who voted for Brett Kavanaugh, is very upset because she said, this goes against what Brett Kavanaugh and Neil Gorsuch told me, that they said that Roe v. Wade is precedent upon precedent. And so, well, yeah, but precedents can be overturned if they're wrong.
John,
like see Plessy versus Ferguson, Lochner, all these bad past Supreme Court decisions that the court wound up overturning.
I mean, to be fair, it depends on what the meaning of the word is.
Yeah, a little bit. A little bit.
It is precedent.
Yeah, it is precedent, but now it is not.
It was.
It was precedent, exactly. So let's march through it. The guiding standard that Alito. Let's first go through the standard of looking at, is abortion a constitutional right? Is abortion a right that is protected under the Constitution? Now, the grounding for the right to abortion has always been the 14th Amendment Due Process Clause. The 14th Amendment Due Process Clause, which says, no person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. And liberals have used, the liberal justices on the Supreme Court have used the 14th Amendment Due Process Clause to create new rights that aren't anywhere else expressly, that are nowhere in the Constitution expressly stated. And say, no, it comes out of the 14th Amendment Due Process Clause. You have to have this as part of liberty under the Due Process Clause. Planned Parenthood versus Casey. Let me actually define this first. What are we overruling here? The Supreme Court here would be overruling kind of Roe v. Wade, but really more so, as Justice Alito notes, overruling Planned Parenthood versus Casey. So Planned Parenthood versus Casey was the 1992 Supreme Court decision that more or less its legal reasoning replaced Roe v. Wade. It kind of came to the same ultimate outcome as Roe v. Wade, but sort of replaced its legal reasoning. It gave more latitude for states to regulate some things kind of related to abortion. So this case is deciding whether or not to overturn kind of both Roe v. Wade and Planned Parenthood versus Casey. And Planned Parenthood versus Casey said that the right to abortion was located in liberty. The word liberty as used in the 14th Amendment Due Process Clause. No one shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. The right to have an abortion is part of liberty. You can't get rid of it without due process of law. Now, the justices in the Supreme Court in the late 90s came up with this standard to try to limit what kinds of new rights that you can cook up out of the 14th Amendment Due Process Clause. Because a lot of liberals had done this. Obergefell v. Hodges is sort of the most recent example of a new constitutional right, now the right to gay marriage, that was sort of cooked up out of the 14th Amendment. And it was actually Chief Justice Rehnquist, in one of, I think, his greatest decisions, Washington v. Glucksberg, which was in the late 90s. It could have been the Roe v. Wade of physician-assisted suicide, but it wasn't. And basically what Chief Justice Rehnquist said was, we're not going to recognize any rights as coming from the 14th Amendment unless they are essential to a scheme of ordered liberty and grounded in this country's legal history and tradition. And it's that key phrase, grounded in this country's legal history and tradition. So what Justice Alito does in sort of this first big section of his opinion is he goes through American legal history and tradition, both at the time of the founding and around the time of the ratification of the 14th Amendment. Okay, so the 14th Amendment was ratified after the Civil War in 1868. So he's looking at these kind of relevant time frames to see, well, was a right to abortion something established either at the time of the American founding? Is it grounded in American history and tradition? Is it anywhere in American history and legal tradition? Now, the conclusion he comes to is a big, fat no. So, and he could not be more blunt about this. Here's what he has to say on page 13 of the opinion. Until the latter part of the 20th century, there was no support in American law for a constitutional right to obtain an abortion. Zero. None. And he actually writes it, Jonathan, as you can see, just the word zero with a period. None with a period.
Wow.
It's very, very blunt, Justice Alito.
Yeah.
Yeah. He says no state constitutional provision had recognized such a right. Until a few years before Roe was handed down, no federal or state court had recognized such a right, nor had any scholarly treatise of which we are aware. And although law review articles are not reticent about advocating new rights, the earliest article proposing a constitutional right to abortion that has come to our attention was published only a few years before Roe in 1968.
Huh.
So
interesting.
So what Justice Alito is pointing out is that no, a legal right to abortion is just not grounded in American history and legal tradition. In fact, there's nothing about a proposed right to abortion, not even in scholarly literature, until the 1960s. So how can we claim that the 14th Amendment, ratified in the 1860s, is somehow to be interpreted as protecting a right to abortion? And then Alito goes through more of American history with regards to abortion. He goes through the common law, where he talks about how, at worst, abortion was viewed as a crime. And the most he says that people can argue is that pre-quickening abortion wasn't a crime. He sort of says, I mean, that's maybe the best case that people can argue. But just because something wasn't a crime doesn't mean it was a constitutionally protected right. And that's one of the main points he says. There's no evidence that abortion was some kind of right that people could advance. There was plenty of evidence that post-quickening abortion was criminal, some evidence that some pre-quickening abortion was criminal.
So John, you're telling me the early suffragettes in the 1860s, 50 years before they had the right to vote, they were not going around advocating for universal abortion rights for all 9 months of pregnancy?
No, they were not. They were not. And in fact, there were plenty of the suffragettes who were really morally pretty square, AJ squared away, and were opposed to abortion, among many other things. That's why, like the Susan B. Anthony list, which is a big pro-life advocacy organization, they're named after Susan B. Anthony because she was pro-life and opposed to abortion. So anyway, and Justice Alito goes on and on and on. One of the really remarkable things about Justice Alito's opinion was that he said, look, he goes through the common law era, which is America is a common law country, meaning we have this sort of English legal tradition of judge-made law where judges issue decisions on a legal question, and those decisions get handed down in this system of precedence from one judge to the next. America, like most former British possessions, is a common law country. America is, Canada is, Hong Kong used to be until very, very recently when the Chinese sort of overrode the really brilliant Hong Kong legal system. So America is a common law country. He goes through the common law history. There's nothing. And then what Justice Alito goes through is the history of individual states before, during, and after the ratification of the 14th Amendment, passing laws to outlaw abortion. In fact, Justice Alito includes with his draft decision, so his actual ruling is only 67 pages long. So when I say it, I read the whole thing. I've only read the first 67 pages. He then has these appendices in which he goes through every state law criminalizing abortion. He has a section with all the states that criminalized abortion that had those laws on the books in 1868 when the 14th Amendment was ratified. So Missouri, Illinois, New York, Ohio, Indiana, Maine, Alabama, Massachusetts, Michigan, Vermont, Virginia, New Hampshire, New Jersey, and then California, Texas, Louisiana, Iowa, Wisconsin, Kansas, Connecticut, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, Nevada, West Virginia, Oregon, Nebraska, Maryland, Florida, then Minnesota, Arkansas. Basically, almost every state had laws on the books banning abortion. It was something like 3/4 of the states had laws on the books banning abortion at the time the 14th Amendment was ratified, and then more states and territories banned it afterwards. So the point Justice Alito is making is, look, if a right to abortion, if it's allegedly grounded in American history and legal tradition, it would seem pretty weird that almost every state would ban it right around the time of the 14th Amendment. So it's kind of a pretty systematic dismantling of any notion that there is a right to abortion somehow inherent in the Constitution.
And the fact that, again, John, for people who are just tuning in, this opinion was originally circulated February 10th, I believe?
February 10th, 2022.
So the fact that this is the draft, this is maybe not the first draft, but...
Oh, it says first draft.
Wow.
I mean, the first circulated draft, anyway.
God bless those law clerks.
Yeah, they're working hard, man.
I mean, and you can think of how much has probably been added to this opinion, how much has... If the first draft was 91 pages.
Sure.
I think it really does go to show, John, just how flimsy the argument is for a constitutional basis for legal abortion.
Yeah. Well, and certainly we'll talk about this in the next segment about the stare decisis factor, looking at should we preserve Roe v. Wade and Planned Parenthood versus Casey anyway, even though they were wrong. And this is in Justice Alito's assessment of Planned Parenthood versus Casey and Roe v. Wade is even more devastating. So we're going to dig into that in the next segment. This is Right to Life Radio, right here on Power Talk 96.7 and AM 1400. Right to Life Radio. John Girardi. And Jonathan Keller. A duet team, perhaps even better than Johnny Cash and June Carter Cash.
Man.
Other than maritally.
That's high praise.
It's high praise. Thank you all so much for tuning into Right to Life Radio. Okay, Jonathan, we're going through Justice Alito's draft opinion in Dobbs v. Jackson Women's Health Organization. I'm going to his assessment of stare decisis.
And John, I just want to reiterate one thing real quick, because I said this several times on
Go for it.
Twitter and other things. We cannot emphasize enough the drafty nature of this draft opinion.
It is a draft. It is a draft.
And literally, the decision, because I've seen a lot of people say, oh my gosh, Roe v. Wade is overturned. It's like, no. This is not like a movie that it's like, it's been edited. They just released it. I got a copy, a pirated copy of it early. It's like, no, this is like...
It could change, but...
As any student knows who is writing a midterm and cramming, at least maybe I'm the only one who did this. Maybe you were a better student than this, John.
I was not.
I literally was making edits to my paper like until the moment that like, okay,
it got submitted. Yeah.
I'm going to go ahead and now quickly do this.
All right.
So,
well, let's dig in with that caveat that it's a draft. Let's dig in. So I want to talk about the stare decisis thing. So stare decisis, as I said, is the sort of prudential principle that you shouldn't overturn. Supreme Court justices should not overturn a past precedent unless they have a really good reason to do so. And how good a reason they need is sort of up to the whims of different Supreme Court justices. However, Justice Alito gives 5 factors that he's looking at for whether or not he should overturn Roe v. Wade and Planned Parenthood versus Casey. And he talks about the nature of the errors in Roe and Casey, the quality of the legal reasoning, the workability of the rules they imposed, their disruptive effect on other areas of the law, and the absence of concrete reliance. So let's talk about the nature of the error. This is a humongous error if it's wrong. If Roe and Casey are wrong, it's a humongous error that deprives every single state the ability to regulate abortion. Okay, it's a huge interference in the democratic process. It involves really important questions culturally. The nature of the error would indicate that, yeah, you probably should overturn it in that case. Okay, so the nature of the error. He talks about the quality of the legal reasoning in Roe v. Wade and Planned Parenthood versus Casey, both of which he describes as unbelievably shoddy. The court in Roe made all kinds of error as regards the history. They brought in all kinds of irrelevant stuff. They didn't even do a very good job in Roe v. Wade of pinpointing what precise part of the 14th Amendment actually protects the right to abortion. They were sort of vague to say, well, there are a lot of different parts that you could say protects the right to abortion, without actually doing the work of saying, no, it's this part. We're the Supreme Court. It's our job to identify this. All right.
Emanations and penumbras.
Yeah. And he then talks about Planned Parenthood versus Casey, which created these various standards for assessing whether or not an abortion restriction was permissible, by saying that no undue burden, no substantial burden can be placed on someone trying to get an abortion before viability. Well, what is a substantial burden? You can place insubstantial burdens to people getting abortion. And the problem with it has always been seemingly which side of the bed Anthony Kennedy rolled out on. That if he rolled out of bed on his conservative side, he was like, oh, of course a partial birth abortion ban is fine. Yeah. If he rolled out of bed on his liberal side, he was like, oh, it's outrageous to say that an abortion doctor needs admitting privileges at some hospital within 30 miles of where he practices. So the quality of the legal reasoning in Roe v. Wade and Planned Parenthood versus Casey is acknowledged by both the left and the right to not be anything to write home about. The workability of the rules they imposed on the country, also tied in with their legal reasoning. These are not very well workable rules. Constantly, these issues are before the Supreme Court. There's not a great standard here. Their disruptive effect on other areas of the law. We've talked a lot on this show about the idea of the abortion distortion, that when abortion intersects with other areas of the law, all of those normal rules that would normally apply to that area of the law get thrown out in favor of some hyper scrutiny when it comes to the question of abortion. And then finally, the absence of concrete reliance. And this is a big one. A lot of liberals have argued women have depended on legal abortion for organizing their sexual intimate lives for the last 50 years. And the point Alito makes is that, well, no. You can make your airy-fairy statements about society as you want, but individuals, they make a decision about whether or not to do the thing that leads you to get pregnant within on a fairly short time frame. It's not like you're banking on it for months and months and months and months and months and months. You're deciding to have sex now. So for all those reasons, Justice Alito says we should just overturn Roe v. Wade and Planned Parenthood versus Casey, and they must be overturned.
To quote Arnold from that great movie, The Predator. Do it now.
Thank you for listening to Right to Life Radio. A production, as always, of Right to Life of Central California, rtlcc.org. Click the donate button there if you like this show and like what we do. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.